Hello and welcome to Milla's Non-Combat Interviews, where I interview different people who participate in non-combat aspects of Amtgard. Today we have Paragon Wizard, Almost Battlemaster Kalahan Ridgeborn. Hi Kalahan, how are you tonight?
Hello there. I am doing so excellent. I'm so excited to be here and to get to talk about some of my non-combat parts of Amtgard with you. This isn't something I get to dive into very often, so I'm really excited to be on the show tonight.
Thank you. And before we really jump into all the non-combat things, I want to kind of ask you some introductory questions so our audience can get to know you better. So, how did you start in Amtgard and how long have you been playing?
Oh, so I have been playing Amtgard since 2017, and I recently talked about this on my own podcast, which I find really funny, but I'll give you the short version. Amtgard is the game I always wished I was playing but didn't know it. Growing up as a kid, me and my brothers used to bait with LARP out in our woods. We grew up on a tree farm that grew out of control, and so we had 10 acres of forest, and we'd go play in the forest, and we played like Aragon, Lord of the Rings, and anything with magic, dragons, and swords was awesome. And so we were really into that. We had our own, not quite lightest touch, but basically the Amtgard rules of play. But we used Nerf swords. Coming out of you know elementary school, middle school, high school, doing that with my siblings who were younger than me. Going into college, we saw some movies about LARPing. We thought that looked really cool. We tried to start our own LARP. We made some really unsafe weapons at the college there that was just PVC and pool noodles that was like really compressed with duct tape. At our first day event, like three out of our six people got hurt, and we had one guy, an actual Amtgarder, show up, and he invited all of us to come and try Amtgard at his local park. And about a year later, I was the only one that took him up on it, but it took me a year to get out there. And so in 2017, I came out to Amtgard, and it's been in my top three hobbies ever since. It's become part of my lifestyle, something I plan for. And I know this is for non-com, but I just love battle gaming. Like the rest of Amtgard is really cool and I enjoy engaging with it. But really my first love is battle gaming. And being a pretend wizard is such a huge stress relief from my daily life. And so I enjoy disengaging from the stresses of mundanity into the Amtgard sphere as often as you know, can get away with it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so throughout your time as somebody in Amtgard, how has your role kind of evolved over time? Do you see yourself as more a mentor, leader, performer, crafter, or something else?
That's an interesting question because over time, people naturally shift and become different things to different people, right? Just because I'm in a mentoring relationship with one player now doesn't mean I can't be being mentored by someone else. So, in different aspects, I think I fall into all of those categories. I mean, I hardly ever get to make it out to Night Quest, but my favorite way to be in Night Quest is to be an NPC and to get to interact with people. I mentor, through my YouTube channel and through some direct mentorship, I've done a lot of interacting with people. I try to help them increase their battle gaming skill. I am in mentoring relationships with various individuals, both for battle gaming and artistic pursuits. So it'd be really difficult to put myself in one box and say, I am this thing when, you know, the truth resists simplicity.
And that's the kind of answer that I really like to hear whenever I ask that question. I found that most people usually say that they're definitely kind of a jack of all trades or, in different boxes. So now that we know a little bit more about you, Callahan, now let's jump into some general non-combatant questions here. So, what do you do in Amtgard that isn't playing wizard and fighting?
So I actually engaged in a lot of different things. As far as like leadership goes, I'm in the process of trying to resurrect the Shire of Sun Moon Pass here in Warsaw, Indiana. We're rebranding to be Fay Lake, and so that's going to be something that I'm stepping up into this year. I've been the regent at the Grand Duchy level. I've been champion of parks before, so this will be my first time entering the monarchy. and resurrecting a park. So that's something I'm involved in. I probably best well known at this point for my battle gaming YouTube channel. That is, while battle gaming adjacent, I wouldn't say it's directly battle gaming. It's definitely a lot more logistical and technical labor, and it really is a labor of love. Talking to paragons of different classes, interviewing them, bringing them in to talk about how they got to their skill level, what they're doing, their tips and tricks, and then editing that into a palatable format and putting it out there for the masses. My kind of arts and crafts that I do, I have recently taken up embroidery. I find that that is something that takes a very long time, and but not nearly as long as my main craft. I make plastidip shields. I have made, I don't know how many I've made now, but I've made a whole bunch of plastidip shields. I really love doing that. And then I also have recently, and by recently, in the last 2 years, got into award making. And so I do a mixed medium awards that I design where I do wood burning for the base, and then I will paint aspects of the wood burned piece to make portions of it really pop and stand out.
Nice, that's really cool. And I do know more about your shared plastic dipping and your Paragon interviews. And I have also seen your awards at the Lockhaven level. But I would also really like to talk more about your embroidery in a bit because I didn't
Oh,
realize that you started embroidery.
yeah. So my wife, I love my wife to death. She's the boss, is what I often call her. Like she's a mafia lord, but she's my best friend. And a while back, she started getting really into embroidery. And when she was pregnant with our most recent baby, I decided that embroidery can't be all that difficult. And so I decided I was going to try to learn to embroider as a way to hang out with her and do crafts together. And so I bought a learn to embroider kit online. I bought it on Amazon. They shipped it to me, and it came with 4 levels of embroidery. I did the first level and then said, "Yeah, this is super easy, barely an inconvenience. I can do this no problem." And so I went and I bought 3 patterns on Etsy to do embroidery. And so I'm working on my second embroidery that I've got sitting right here, actually. And I would say I am, maybe an eighth of a percent done. So, it's gonna be it's pretty intense. It takes a lot more time and a lot more concentration than some of my other hobbies. So I find that because the idea of when my wife embroiders, it's usually when we're watching a show or a movie or something. And because of the baby right now, the baby's always, fussing or, doing stuff. So it is we're not watching as much TV as we did when she was pregnant, because when she was pregnant, she was on, she was on things like bed rest and couldn't move around a lot. So we were hanging out. And so now baby's out, baby's a lot more active. So I'm not having as much embroidering time as I was anticipating having going forward. So I'm not making nearly as much progress, but it's a pleasant experience. It's almost like doing a jigsaw puzzle for me. Like I enjoy a good jigsaw puzzle and seeing things coming together, and you can, I know where it's going to be, but then actually manifesting it into reality is, I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but that's the way I see embroidery. So I'm a very new embroiderer. I'm working on literally my second project. So we'll see. I'll probably put it into a qualls or something at some point when it's finally done, but it's going to be a hot minute.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know, sorry, when you say embroidery, I automatically think of my underbelt who also does embroidery. So she might be someone you might want to ask if you ever have any issues, but it sounds like you've got it pretty covered so far. So, with all of your different skills in the game, and with all the different crafts you do and whatnot, if someone wanted to get more involved in the non-combat side of Amtgard without fighting, where would they start?
Well, that's a really tricky question, isn't it? Because if they want to get more involved in the non-combat, there's a huge amount of ways they could do that. Personally, I think that the group that needs to be the most involved with the non-combat is the fighters. Our fighters can't be single-faceted people, right? You can't
Mhm.
only battle game. You have to do other things as well. because if you don't, you're not going to be fully engaging in the community. If you volunteer, if you're doing arts and sciences, if you're getting involved in leadership in some way, you need to be more than just a fighter. And so the big thing, I mean, when I come to an Amtgard event, I am a fighter. I'm not worried about classes or demos or doing anything other than making sure I'm in every battle game. So for me, anything that I make at like an event is a secondary objective for me. If it's convenient in my battle gaming schedule, I will go to a panel discussion, for example. But that's just the like Comic-Con mentality. I can't do everything, so I'll prioritize the thing I want to do the most. So for me, I think the most important thing is diversifying your involvement because otherwise you're gonna lose interest over time. And like that's part of the thing that you'll see is you'll have somebody show up at the beginning of summertime, they'll be really engaged in the game, they're really into battle gaming, and then wintertime comes, there's no battle games, they're not interested anymore. Next year we're losing them. So the retention of non-com is super duper important. And I think I lost track of my question here. You were asking how can people get it started in non-com, right? You're asking about how people could start doing non-com activities.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like a good launching point.
that is going to depend on your interest, right? The thing I always tell people because I'm going to draw some parallels here. When you have someone who wants to start battle gaming and they ask what class they should start as, I tell them the best starter class is the one you want to play. So the best thing to start doing for non-com is the one that sounds most interesting to you. Do you think that garbing is really cool? Maybe you should try garbing. I'm a terrible garber. Every outfit I've ever tried to sew has turned out lopsided or crooked, right? But I've tried it and I know it's not for me. You should try garbing. Okay, if you don't like garbing, maybe you should look into weapon construction, right? Our game can be super duper expensive if you're buying your weapons. So you should look into building your own weapons. It's not that difficult. Doesn't take a lot of supplies. All you really need is a hacksaw and some tape, and you can go from there. And so you could get into weapon construction, and that can help A, save you money, and B, give you something to do during not fighting days. I think that my specific crafts are a little bit more of a heavy lift. Plasti dipping is something that if you want to get into plasti dipping, you have to have space. You don't necessarily have to have space. I started plasti dipping when I lived in an apartment, but it's definitely going to be more difficult and it's going to be more time consuming. But if you want to get involved in any craft, I mean, just really look around and think to yourself, gosh, that seems neat, and then go do that thing. Maybe you want to get involved in the monarchy at your local park. You could pick up a fairly low stakes position. If you're a battle gamer looking to get into a non-com position, I would encourage you to look at champion as a opportunity, because then what you do is you tell the regent, hey, I want to work with you on the ANS side. I want to be one of your judges and I want you to show me how to do these things. And then you can start working towards that. Work your way up in the promotions, if you will, of the club running aspect of Amtgard. And you can take that angle. You could, start your own podcast. Both of us will acknowledge that starting your own podcast is fairly difficult, but it's in scope. It's something that's possible to be done. So
Hmm.
really look at your local community, think to yourself, what does my local community lack that I think would be fun to do? And then try that thing and see if it works. You know?
Yeah, and speaking of the non-combat community in Amtgard, do you feel like you found your own niche inside of the non-combat side of things, or do you consider yourself more open to maybe other crafts or other non-combat things?
I don't feel like I've narrowed myself into a niche. I certainly have things that I put a lot more perk points into. By the time you get to my level with doing like plasti dipping shields, I've built custom jigs for my bandsaw to cut shields better. My paths are, I guess, fairly narrow at this point. There, like I'm not looking at garbing, for example. I know I've talked about garbing already, but I'll mention it again. I'm a terrible seamstress. I'm not good at it, and so it's not really something I'm looking to pursue. I found a bunch of different crafts that I really enjoy doing, and I'm going to keep doing those. But I am also open to trying new things that I haven't done before. So I don't feel like I'm locked in to anything, but I am certainly locked out of a couple of things.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Not every craft is, not everyone's going to like every single craft. So I completely get that. I can't do chainmail. I've tried multiple times. My brain cannot comprehend it. It's 4D chess, but
My hands are too big for chainmail. I can't get the tiny rings to go together and be like I've got a friend Gore. Gore makes the most beautiful chains. They're really, really cool. Another great chain guy is Evander. Evander does amazing chains. They show me these things. I'm like, how can you manipulate these tiny little rings into these crazy shapes? And like I wish I could do chainmail because it looks so cool, but it's just not in scope for me. It some things you're just naturally not going to be good at or not enjoy doing. And I've tried doing chainmail before. I agree. It feels very tedious. It's very difficult for me. It makes my hands hurt. So yeah, I 100% get that.
yeah, another good chainmail artist I'm going to shout out, by the way, is Valesia's Page Echo. They tried teaching me how to do chainmail, and they were very, very patient at Keep on the Borderlands, and I appreciate them. So, bless. But yeah, really sweet guy. And so speaking of, stuff you've tried, have you ever inspired anyone else to try the non-combat side of Amtgard, and how did it work out?
To my knowledge, there is not really anybody who's done any of the crafts that I do because I did them. They're the three main ANS things that I do: my videos, my shields, and my embroidery. Everyone else already does embroidery. It's I won't say super duper common or basic, but it's one of the more beginner friendly, low barrier to entry crafts. So that's definitely not something I've inspired anyone to. I don't really see anybody else doing shields the way that I do, partially because it's a really difficult medium to teach and learn because it's so time consuming. It doesn't, like with a chainmail class, I can sit down and in an hour you can teach me how to do a chain weave and we can make some progress and then I can take that home. But if you want to learn how to do plastidip shields, an hour just will not cut it. A weekend probably would be, hey, we're going to cut our shield blanks and then we're going to input in the handle. All right, now we're going to go battle game for an hour and a half, and then we'll come back and that will still not be locked in because it takes like 24 hours for some of the chemicals to cure. And so you like there's a hours in an event problem for doing demos for that. So I don't think I've ever inspired anyone to aspire to any part of non-combat in Amtgard.
Well, that's really interesting given your Paragon interviews, which is now the thing that I'm going to be asking you about because I've been pretty excited to ask you just about your podcast and whatnot. You're really well known. So, what made you decide to start doing your podcast? Like, what inspired you?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't know if you have ever seen Warlord Magni's videos. Warlord Magni is a player out of Polaris, and he's like the Hello Kitty knight. I'm not sure if he got knighted. I heard he
Oh
was
yeah.
either getting knighted or was knighted. Magni, if you're out there, I'm sorry for not being certain on that. But he did a bunch of videos where he would teach different techs, and he had different guests come on and do like how to do different fighting styles and talking about being a warlord and trying to help people move up the warlord chain. And I've seen other things like that, but I was specifically watching one of his videos, and I thought to myself, "Dang, I really wish that some battle master out there would do this, but for battle gaming." And I thought to myself, yeah, you know what? When I get my battle master, that's what I'll do is I'll start a YouTube channel called Battlemaster Kalahan, and I will start talking to people about different techs and doing battle game thing. And I started like planning out my YouTube channel in my mind. I was like, okay, well, who would I have on? I'd bring in the Paragons. We could talk about their class and how to play their class, and I'd bring in battle masters to talk about that. And I built this idea up in my mind, and then I thought, gosh, sucks that I'm not a battle master, so I can't do this yet. And then I kicked that idea around for a little while, and finally I kind of landed on this thing of like, I'm not a battle master yet, but no one else is doing this. it can't be that difficult. I should just do it. And so I was like, all right, well, if I'm not a battle master, I can't call the channel Battlemaster Kalahan because that's not what I am. So I landed on Almost Battlemaster Kalahan. And I talked to a couple of my friends and mentors about it. And I was like, hey, what do you guys think about this idea? They all were super supportive. They all thought it was a great idea. They thought the name was funny. And so I started and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to see where this goes. My knight, Sir Manama, was really excited about the idea. I made 3 demo videos. Part of my channel that I had to stop temporarily was I was making a Paragon interview every Tuesday and an educational video every Thursday. And so I cut 3 videos that were in the educational category, sort of a proof of concept. And I sent them out to some people that I trusted for feedback. And the overwhelming feedback I got was your audio quality is terrible. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I do not have money for a microphone right now. And Sir
Mhm.
Mano was like, hey, I really believe in this project. And so he actually gave me the money to buy my nice microphone that I use. And he gave me that initial investment and really set me on like, okay, now I'm hard committed to doing this because someone else put skin in the game. I have to do this. I have to make sure it's good. And so I got Ash and Gore and Manama, and they were my original 3. And I was like, okay, I get these guys in. I did their interviews, and we just kind of went from there. And now I've got almost 270 260 subscribers somewhere in there, and I've put out almost 100 hours worth of Paragon interviews. I don't even know how many hours of like educational content around basics of battle gaming philosophy, and the wizard class specifically. Since then, I got my Paragon wizard, so I feel like I have some proper authority to talk on the channel now. There's no more powerful imposter syndrome than talking to people and having opinions and claiming to be an almost battle master when you don't even have your Paragon, and you're like, okay, I'm making myself part of this circle, but do I really belong here? And so that was a really great affirmation that I did belong there. So yeah, that's to long answer a short question. My initial inspiration was wishing that there was just more content out there. There was a Sir Merrick a number of years ago, like right before COVID, did the on the path interviews where he did panel interviews with Paragons, and he was the other big inspiration for the channel for me. And I remember watching the Wizard video. And watching the Wizard video, there was like 6 dudes in this video, and by the time he got done with each question, uh, every one of them, like whoever went first, gave a really good answer, and then everyone else just sort of went, "Yeah, I agree with that," and didn't really have anything else to add because they didn't have the space to do the question. So I knew I wanted to do one-on-one interviews and
Mhm.
talk with one person and really lift their style up and get in there and understand what they were doing and how they were doing it, because the panel interviews just didn't work for me. And so I just created the content that I wished was there and that I think other people were hoping to find too. And I've gotten a really positive response from it.
Definitely. I mean, everyone pretty much knows you as the guy who does the awesome interviews. So, what would you say one of the most challenging parts of running these interviews are?
Oh, so the for sure most difficult thing is finding talent to come on the show. Believe it or not, I have about a 30% rejection rate when I reach out to people.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, so I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of this stuff, and so I have a number of qualifiers. So I have there's a guy who's I can't remember his Amtgard name, but his name is Ken, and he helps run the org, and he pulls data for me. And so I have in my spreadsheet, I have a list of every Paragon ever as of December. And so all of those paragons, and so I have them all pulled in, and then I built out different reports that I run off of that data. And so, like, if I pull up the Rising Wind spreadsheet, I've got it open right now. There are tons of people on here, but I don't want to go back and bother someone that got their Paragon in 2007 and they haven't played that class in 10 years and be like, hey, so what I did was I filtered by first, I filtered by people who are active players still. So anyone that hasn't signed in the last year, they fall off my spreadsheet. I don't see them, right? And
Hmm.
then anyone who got their Paragon before 2020 is the cutoff I made. So if you got your Paragon after 2020, I figure it's okay to reach out to you because we're still in modern Amtgard at that point. But if it was pre 2020, if you come to me and want to talk, absolutely, I'll bring you in the show. But I'm not going to reach out to you because that, like, what have you done lately? If you're a master anti paladin and you got it in 2003, 22 years ago now. A, are you even fielding still? Are you just in the non-com zone? So finding talent is really difficult. And then of the people I've talked to, some people just really don't like being on camera. They're not willing to get out there and have, and maybe they're nervous. They're going to say something wrong and get murdered in the comments. That never happens. But so I've had a shockingly high number of people who've told me, no, I don't really feel comfortable coming on the show. One or two of those people have later come back and been like, hey, I've watched some more of your videos. I'd like to come on now. I'm really respectful, and that's partially why I track everyone. I have a whole page on my spreadsheet where I keep track of why people have declined. And if they've declined, I put them on there and I don't bother them again because that's not cool to be bugging people over and over again. And so, like, if I look at my spreadsheet, there's almost as much red as there is green, and for who I've interviewed, who I'm hoping to bring in later, and so yeah, sourcing talent is really difficult. And then also out of kingdom, it's easy to get big britches and be like, I'm almost Battlemaster Kalahan. If you don't know who I am, you should, you peasant. I'm a celebrity. I'm not a celebrity, you know. I'm just me. I'm just a guy talking to people about his favorite game. And so trying to get into other kingdom, break into these other kingdoms. I did a special 12 days of Christmas thing where I did 12 paragons over 12 days, one of each class from 12 different kingdoms. And that was super cool. It was really rewarding. But getting in touch with paragons from other kingdoms was really hard because what I did was I pulled the reports from the orc about active paragons. Then I went through and I picked my targets. And on average, for out of kingdom, I tried to find 5 people and I got one of them in. Sometimes you just can't find them on Facebook or Discord, and they just got a really normal sounding name. You can't find them. Sometimes you find them and then they ghost you. They just don't respond. Maybe they're not checking their Facebook. Maybe they got some sort of spam filtering going on. Maybe they're just not interested. You never hear back from them. Like, okay, you move along. The people that do come on, once I get someone to commit to being on the show, from there it's pretty easy. I've got my groove now for doing interviews. I've got my questions pretty much dialed in. I know about how long it's going to take. I've got a scheduling app now. So instead of having to play the calendar game of I have these 3 days and they're like, oh, those days are bad for me, I just send them my link. They pick a day that works for them that's free. They sign up, we're good to go. And then I've got my editing process down quite a bit. When I was first starting, I was watching each video about 5 times, and now I've got it down to twice. So that's a lot more doable. It takes a lot less time than it was originally. So really finding the talent is what is the hardest portion of it.
And speaking of talent, is there a specific like dream episode or, maybe even person that you would like to get up on your Paragon interview channel?
Chasing the dream. I mean, there's a guy who I probably will never be able to get because he hasn't been active in a couple of decades now. I would love to get the first Paragon Wizard. I think that would be really cool. It'd just be fun for me because, at one point, I don't know who Oriel McJoppy is, but he was the first Paragon Wizard by my record. He last attended in 2018, and like that's pretty cool to be the first guy, at least according to the orc that got this award. I'd love to bring in the first of anybody, honestly. The first any Paragon would be such a cool video title. Just be like, yeah, here's the first guy. As far as active players go, I mean, I brought in a ton of really awesome people already. The big ones for me, the ones that were the most rewarding, have been Sid out of Neverwinter. Sir Sid is an amazing battle gamer. He's a phenomenal dude. I love talking to him every chance I get. Death Lily out of Polaris is definitely a favorite guest. Out of the Rising Winds, it's difficult to pick a single favorite out of the Rising Winds. If I had to pick one, I think it would be Tyrant Ash has been my
Yeah.
favorite interview. Just he's such a fun and that's a really hard, like if you ask me again tomorrow, that might be a totally different answer. Just but Tyrant Ash was a phenomenal interview. Hodge out of Polaris was fantastic. So there've been a bunch of people that were really really great. The most fun interview that I've done so far. This is gonna sound so like conceited, but when I had Solve interview me, that was a ridiculous amount of fun for me because I never get to be on the other side of the chair, you know? And so getting to sit there and gush my opinions about Wizard for an hour, that was so much fun. I almost want to get another Paragon just so I can come in and talk again because that was delightful. I have a lot of things that I'm happy to say. So I think I might have lost the train of your question again, but
Oh, no, you're good. You're actually right on par. So, do you have any plans? And I guess my last question for you regarding your podcast is,
mhm.
do you have any plans on expanding, or how do you see it continuing on in the future?
Well, that's a really big question, right? So, I mean, as far as expanding goes, like how do you expand? I am planning on for 2026. I've already started gathering names for people I'm going to try to bring in an interview. So I am taking January and February off from publishing Paragon interviews. I've got a couple of videos that are out already and some more that are coming through that are tangential topics. These are just sort of open format, more chats than interviews. I basically don't edit them, and they're sort of a placeholder on the same tempo, but they're not Paragon interviews. We're talking about like night quests and what does it mean to be a reeve and like how do you do war cratting for events, stuff like that. Same tangential topics, but in March, January, February, March. Yeah, March, the third month, we'll be coming back in with new Paragon interviews. I'm going to redo the questions a little bit, hopefully make them a little bit more relevant, always improving on that front, and bringing back in some old favorites, some new faces to talk more about battle gaming. I would like to, now that I'm actually a Paragon wizard, I really would like to make a series. This is a long term dream of mine. I call it Apprentice in a Box. And the idea is I want to make a series of YouTube videos that teaches people to play Wizard the way I taught myself to play Wizard.
Hmm,
And
that's interesting.
I think it'd be really cool. Just like the hey, if you know, and the big thing for me is if I get a wizard that's already an established wizard, that's great. But the ideal apprentice is someone who day one, credit one, wants to follow the plan and commits to getting all the way to Paragon from there. Like that'd be the like crazy amount. So partially will be a leveling guide, partially will be philosophy. I haven't nailed it all 100% of the way down yet. Like it have spell list design elements. Just like the idea is literally it's an apprenticeship in a box. Like if I get hit by a bus and the bus gives me cancer and I die, this is the legacy of hey, Callahan left this apprenticeship in a box. Anyone that wants it can do this apprenticeship, and it will, at the bare minimum, give you the knowledge and philosophy to become a Paragon wizard. I can't give you the skill. I can't hand you the skill, but I can try to teach you everything that I know and everything that I've learned throughout the years and talk about that and then expose you to those ideas and play styles and ways of thinking to assist with doing that. And so I've played with a lot of different ways that series could look like, and I haven't quite nailed down on how I want that to be or have the time to do it, honestly. So that's something that I'd like to do for the channel. I also am soft wanting to make shorts for the channel. A
Mm.
lot of There's a lot of growth vector. We're getting into sort of the business side of YouTube here. I don't know if anyone cares or not, but my channel is not monetized. For me to become a monetized channel, I have to have a minimum of 500 subscribers. There are about 6,000 total Amtgarders, so I only need about 15% of Amtgard to subscribe to my channel to be monetized. So that's not realistically a like business goal for me. This is a passion project, but that'd be cool to get to that 500 subscriber count. And that'll happen or it won't. It doesn't really matter. It's not why I'm doing the channel. It just is the metric that YouTube says is like, hey, you've made it as a small creator. So I kind of want to make it there, you know? But
Yeah.
shorts are a way of trying to get discovered. So I'm hoping to bring out my Wizard Apprentice, and I have a second smaller Wizard Apprentice, and I want to do a series of shorts about every wizard spell in Amtgard, how they work, what they do, what those look like, and I feel like that could be really cool as a series of shorts to release over the course of a year because we have a ton of wizard spells. So I feel like I could release 2 shorts a week and have that be maybe successful. I don't know if people would like that or not, but they could look up how to do a spell and what it does. We could break it down for them. I'm still working on the format for that, still thinking about that. So those are the ways that I'm thinking about expanding the channel. The core of the channel will remain bringing in battle gamers to talk about battle gaming, usually through the metric of their Paragon class, because that's a easy metric to discern by. I don't battle game in Crystal Groves. So I can say, okay, you have a Paragon. That means you probably have something worth saying. So I can bring you in and feel like I'm not wasting my time, right? Whereas if I opened it up to every wackadoodle and their brother in law, I'm going to get, a huge variety of people that are going to be coming in. And so and I'm going to be missing out on some really good fighters that don't have Paragons yet, but it is a scoping decision, right? You have to make a decision about what you will and will not do inside of a project. Otherwise, it's just going to grow exponentially, and then you're going to get burnt out way too fast.
Yeah. That was really awesome to learn more about your podcast. Thank you. And it's really nice to also kind of get the scoop of what you're thinking about. I think shorts would be an awesome way to go. A lot of people tend to see them. So, as, short form content becomes more widely popular and whatnot. I mean, it already is, but now shifting from your podcast, I would actually like to discuss your shield making with you. I know that's kind of your main thing you focus on, your main craft that you focus on in Amtgard. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it. I know with your shields, they're all handmade. Um,
Correct.
hmm And like you hand cut them all out. What techniques do you find yourself using a lot for them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, do you want me to walk you through like concept to done like the build process or
Yeah, sure, if you'd like. I would love to. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would also like to hear about how, your methodology for it too.
Yeah. So I have at various times tried to set up like shield commissions, and I found that for the most part, trying to do commissions just doesn't work for me. My products are incredibly niche, they take a long time to produce. And so people are usually A, not willing to wait the timeline that it would take, or B, they want things that are outside of my scope of plausibility. So because I am doing everything by hand, like we have some really amazing artists in the Rising Winds even that do plastidip, but they're doing like CNC machining, CAD work to design these shields that they're putting out there, and that's just not what I'm doing. So like when I start with a shield project, usually I have an overarching like idea or concept. Usually it starts with a blank, right? So there's only so many ways you can build a shield, right? Circle, oval, kite, flat top heater. You can make tower shields. There's a set number of things. So usually I start by acquiring the foam piece and then I will sketch out on the foam. So I bought a bunch of metallic Sharpie markers because they show up really well. So I'll sketch out on the foam the shields that I'm planning on cutting out of that piece of foam, right? And then I'll have those blanks, and then from the blank, I will I'll cut them out with my bandsaw, and then I will usually I'll rig them up for their handle, however that handle is going to be, if it's going to be a punch shield or a strap shield. Personally, I prefer punch shields. I'm not a strap shield fan. So if for the majority of my projects, I just make punch shields. They work better for me and my play style. And I've for the most part given up on trying to sell shields to make money. I will usually be making a shield for myself. And then what I'll do is I'll rotate out my oldest shield and I'll find somebody that wants to buy it for, however much I can get out of it, usually between 50 and 80 bucks. And then I'll just, shift that on to the next guy. And usually they're in pretty okay condition because I don't fight a ton with shields. I'm a wizard main. So they're usually, like 80 to 90% of their life will still be remaining in them. But so once I have the shield blank, I will I'll put the handle in there, and then so the blank itself is usually 2 pound or 4 pound open cell foam that's sandwiched, and I like the 5 layer more than the 6 layer because the 6 layer has too many like inlays in it and it gets heavy. The so and then I'll cut the handle, I'll insert the handle, and I'll get that set up. Once that's set, then I go to the front face. I like to use the blue camp pad for the front face, and that takes 2 layers for the blue camp pad front face to really lock it in and make it solid. And
Hmm.
then once that is on there, then I take EVA foam. I picked that up from the Hobby Lobby, and I get the 4 millimeter thick EVA foam, or sometimes I use the 6, just depends on what they have. And I'll put that on the front face of the shield. And then I will do around the outside edge of the shield, I'll do another piece of EVA foam. First, I'm getting ahead of myself. After I get the front face of the shield on, then it's time to cut it to true shape. When I say true shape, so you have your rough cut and then your true cut. Your rough cut,
Hmm.
you do a rough cut of the blank and then the blue camp pad and the EVA foam because if you final cut, inevitably your foam isn't going to line up perfect, right? So if you make it slightly bigger and then cut it down later, you get really, really crisp, fine lines. And so I use my bandsaw and I'll do my final cut and I'll cut the shield out. Once it's cut out, then I'll edge it with more EVA foam. And the way that I do that is I use a roller and I dap around the whole outside edge, and then I'll dap around on the inside, and then I use my heat gun to heat the EVA foam as you're laying it down, so it sticks into place. And then I use sewing pins and I pin the EVA foam down as I go, so it stays in place where I want it to be. And then once that's all done, now that blank is technically it's good to go. It's ready to be like birthed, if you will. So then what I do is I take the actual exact measurements, and I have a Cricut cutting machine, and so I have the Cricut software, and I use the Cricut software. And what I'll do is I will real size put that into the Cricut software. I'll put the shield, I'll put the wrapper around the shield, the overlay on the shield, and then I will figure out what I'm going to put on the shield. And I'll start designing that in the Cricut design space. And then once it's, roughed out and figured out what I'm looking for, sometimes you start with an idea. I recently made a tower shield. So I got given a tower shield blank by a player that didn't want their tower shield anymore. And they said, hey, I don't like this shield. Do something cool with it. Keep it. I don't care. So like, all right, cool. So I was like, you know what? This shield needs a Highland cow on it. So I found a bunch of different Highland cows and I made a composite image, and I found my Highland cow. And then I used the Cricut machine to cut out paper. And then I took that paper and I stuck it on the EVA foam again. I used the 4 millimeter EVA foam, and I pinned that using my sewing pins. And then what I'll do is I'll use my hot knife, my wire knife, to then cut out the shapes of all of the pieces. And that process is a little tricky. I've tried, people will tell me in the comments, I'm certain, you can cut foam using your Cricut machine. No, you can't. I've tried it. It never cuts all the way through. It never cuts it correctly. You don't get those crisp, fine lines. So machine cutting just doesn't work for me. And so I'll cut it out, And then I will dap that onto the face of the shield, again, using those sewing pins to hold them in place. Because something you might not know about DAP is that DAP actually is a exothermic reaction the way when it is drying. And so if you
Yeah.
put foam on there, it can actually move the foam as it's drying. So I pin it in place, usually with a minimum of 3 pins, because the 3 pins then hold it triangularly in position so it can't move. And the bigger the piece, the more pins you need. Otherwise, you can end up with air bubbles, and that's really bad. But you pin it as you go, and you lay it in there really good. And then then you got to let that cure. And at that point, once I've got the face on, I will let it cure for a minimum of 72 hours. Usually, every time I do DAP, I like to let it cure. Once you put the DAP on, DAP is a like 3-step process. So first, you put the DAP onto your material. Then you have to wait at least a half hour for the DAP to become tacky. And once it's tacky, you can combine the pieces, right? Once the pieces are combined, you can do more on top of it, but it is best to let it cure. And so if it cures for 24 hours, then you're really golden. But once I'm done with the dapping, before I even think about doing plastidip, I let it cure for at least 72 hours. And the reason for that is plastidip actually will eat the DAP. If the DAP has any moisture in it at all, the plastidip will eat the DAP and your glue will come loose and your pieces will end up coming up off of the product and
Oh
it'll look
yeah.
really bad. And that's just the way that the chemicals interact, right?
Hmm.
Also, just a quick thing. If you are doing DAP or plastidip or chemicals in general, you need to wear the proper protective equipment. You need to be wearing gloves, eye protection, and you need to be working in a well ventilated space or use a respirator. So I like to use my garage. I open up the garage door and I open up the side door so I get a cross breeze. And then I let the air flow, and that way the chemicals don't build up. But it can be really dangerous to work with these chemicals, especially over a long time if you let those chemicals build up and get in your lungs. Definitely don't use either of these products in your house. Please never do them inside your building. That's just a bad way to happen, right? Even if you have windows open, your house is going to smell funky for weeks. Don't do it inside. Okay. So then
Yeah.
uh, I'll start plastic dipping after it's cured. Minimum 3 days. I'll be honest, I usually try to let it go a little bit longer. Depends on how time crunched I am. This phase of the project usually isn't time crunch phase because it takes a while. So once you start plastic dipping, there are 2 types of plastic dip you can use. There's spray on plastic dip and there is paint on plastic dip. And if you use paint on plastic dip, I found that it's best to thin the material and you use naphtha to thin it. And so what I found is if you get the cans of plastic dip, you crack it open, you put it into a new paint can, fill that plastic dip can up with about halfway up with naphtha, put the cap back on, shake it really thoroughly, then mix it into your paint can. So you want a 2 parts plastic dip to 1 part naphtha. And I find the little buckets, the resealable paint buckets you get at like Menards work really well for this. And once you've got that thoroughly mixed, you can start painting it on there. For paint on, I recommend 3 layers everywhere, 5 layers where it's going to take hits. And that just gives it a lot of durability. It makes it feel good. The 3 layers on like the back where you're holding it is going to make it resistant to scuffing, rubbing, ending up getting worn down too quickly. Whereas you really need 5. The last thing you need is a crushing breaking pole to ruin the really nice paint job on your shield, right? So then once you've got that done, you're again are going to let that whole process. You can plasti dip you as soon as it's dry, which is usually about an hour. I usually do it in phases because my the way I do my shields, I usually do 2 or 3 at a time because there's a lot of do a step and then you're done for a day. So if you do a step and then you're done for a day 3 times, it makes you feel like you're getting more time out of your crafting time. So the I'll usually do the front face and then the edge, and then I'll flip it over and do the back face, the plastic dipping, and then the spray is okay. It tends to get a weird texture thing going on because it is a
Hmm.
spray paint, and it ends up getting a little like a weird texture to it. Like I can't
Does it like
really
build up in
explain it
different
without you.
places?
What was that?
Oh, sorry, I'm just asking, does it like build up in different places? Like, I know that's a thing that
It
happens with spray paint sometimes.
Yeah, like because it's not true spray paint, right? It's plastic. It basically when you do it with the spray, it's like three parts naphtha, one part plastidip, and so you're spraying it, yes, but it doesn't coat evenly because plastidip has a really high viscosity. It likes to stick to itself, right?
Yeah.
It pools. And so your layers can end up being uneven and it gets a texture that feels like a really, really high grit sandpaper almost. And that's fine. It doesn't make a smooth painting surface a lot of the time. And you know, I've used it and it's okay, especially if you're like trying to get into really tight corners. But I use the spray more of a like spot than as a finish face. So I like to use it in weird little corners where I want to make sure I get extra coverage, things like that, that might not necessarily be seen, but are going to be structurally important. So then once the plastic dipping is done, you again are going to wait 3 to 5 days for that to cure, and
Mm.
then you can paint it. The plastic dip will be ready after a day, maybe two max, but you're waiting for the smell to dissipate so your wife doesn't yell at you. So that's a 3 to 5 day process there. So then you bring it in and you start painting it. I use the Liquitex Basics paints. I used to use just the acrylics from Walmart, but they have a cracking problem where over time the places that take a lot of hits will tend to crack and not be as flexible. And the Liquitex Basics, I haven't used them long enough to know for sure, but that's what the community says to use. And those are supposedly have a lot more flex to them. And then I use frog juice to seal up the whole thing when they're done. And the frog juice goes on. You want, again, 3 layers everywhere, 5 layers where it's going to take hits. And then, you can spray frog juice every 30 minutes. And then the shield will cure for, again, 3 to 5 business days. And then you're done. You're ready to go out and whack with them.
Wow. Like, I never quite realized how much goes into the shield making process, especially with plastic dipping and stuff. I definitely learned a lot, especially with placing down sewing pins. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Have you seen my dragon scale shield that I made?
Yes, if it's yeah, that one, yeah. Yeah.
That shield took me over 200 hours to do because well that one was way overly complicated. There was a lot of painting involved. A simpler shield will take 80 to 100 hours for me to make all the way through just because there's so much time, and that's active time, not necessarily like a wait time. Like when I say it takes me a year to make a batch of shields, it takes me a year to make a batch of shields. And so like I'm finishing up my 2025 shields right now that I just got to because it's been so cold. That's the other thing is weather will make a difference. If it's too humid, your DAP and plastidip won't set correctly. If it's too cold, your chemicals won't set correctly. So weather does make a big difference. Now inside painting is just fine, but I've had these shields done for like a week and a half, and I've been waiting for it to be over 40 degrees so that I could actually finish sealing them with that frog juice. So I've got 3 in the garage right now, finishing up my 2025 cohort that are going to go out to a couple of people, and I need to get those done because Lockhaven's Dragon Master is the 11th, which is 5 days from now, and I'm planning on submitting all 3 of those shields. And so, yeah, it
Oh,
takes me
nice.
a long time to do these crafts, and so going into like a Dragon Master, I'm not going to be on theme because I decided, you know, 7.5 months ago what this thing was going to look like and have been working towards that ever since. And so if the theme works out, great. But I don't really like themes on ANS events because of that. It makes it hard for me to, like, okay, well, do I submit this now or do I wait? And then there's the weird problem of, like, okay, with awards culture the way it is, if I submit 3 shields at once, I'm not going to get 3 awards for it. They're going to put in 1 award, if that. And then, like, okay, and then it'll be another year before I can finish. So it's not my ladder chasing thing that I'm doing it for. I started off doing plasti dip shields to chase that ladder, and it's shifted out. Now I'm ladder chasing battle gaming because orders of battle are out there. But yeah, the shields really do take a very long time to produce, and I almost hate them by the time I'm done. I'm like, good, you're done. Get out of my garage, you know?
Yeah. And so other than the Dragon Master shields, are there any other projects that are currently in process with shield making, or is it just those?
I have a new cohort that I'm starting for early 2026. I have a problem. I am working on three small shields right now. So I have a commission actually. I don't normally do commissions. This is actually a really weird thing that I have back-to-back commissions. So those three shields that I just finished up are actually for a husband and wife who play out of Illinois, and their shields they're gonna they already seen them. They think they're fantastic, and so I'm happy with them. But I've got another commission that I'm gonna start working on soon. I just got the straps for the strap shield in, and then I have a pair of shields I'm doing for me. So I've decided that I'm going to play a little scout coming up soon. So I'm making
Oh,
a scout shield because that's also a weird thing about me. I like to have a shield that is designed for a class if I'm going to play that class. So
yeah.
like I have my tower shield for if I play paladin, and I have a shield for when I play barbarian, and I have a shield for if I play anti paladin, and I have a shield for when I play healer, and I'm about to have a shield for when I play scout, and they're all customized for that class, either aesthetically, historically aesthetically, but going forward more equipment wise. Trying to
Mhm.
build in like ways of managing that class's abilities. So the scout shield, for example, is going to have a tie-in for the crossbow for the scout class that I got. That's all I'm willing to say about that at the moment. And then the other small shield I'm making a heater shield. I mentioned briefly earlier that I'm starting my own park this year, Fay Lake. I'm going to put Fay Lake's heraldry on this shield that is going to be the shield of Fay Lake. Eventually, when we have a champion, it will be the champion's shield for that reign, and then it'll just be an artifact of the park that I think will be a really cool thing. And then the champion can take it to Kingdom and represent us, and take us to Lockhaven and represent us there, and then they'll have that as an option for them. And then eventually, maybe it'll gain a magic power or something. I haven't figured that all out yet. I just know I'm making a shield for my park.
And
So
honestly, I think that's lovely, and I would love to see more parks have different artifacts like that. I think that that's also a really good way to also encourage RP. So,
yeah, I also want to make a Blade of the Lake.
hmm,
So Fay Lake is the name of the park is inspired by Arthurian legends, the Lady of the Lake. Our
yeah.
heraldry is literally the Lady of the Lake sticking her arm up, holding her sword, and so I feel like I want to have the shield of the shield of Fay Lake and the blade of the Fay Lake, and I haven't nailed down the name yet. The Lake Blade or something that'll be magic items for our park, and I think that'd be really cool to have.
I think that's really cool, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And I guess that kind of ties in with my next question, which was going to be, what's a project that you really want to do? So it definitely seems like that's my answer.
For sure. Yeah, I generally start my projects when I want to do them. Right now, most of my energy is going to be going into starting my park and maintaining my podcast. I mean, that the podcast takes so much upkeep, just keeping it going, replying to comments, talking to people that are messaging me. And that takes a lot of time. Doing the interviews takes a lot of time, getting things set up. I almost need a personal assistant, honestly. The You're right. And that makes me sound like I'm such big potatoes. I'm barely running a tiny little podcast, but like something I would love to do. It's not practical right now, but I would love to travel and go to other kingdoms events and then do live shows. I'd love to do a live
Oh,
show for the podcast, like show up at a Polaris event and do a live interview with Haj or DLMS, roll down to Florida and do a live show with Sid. I think that'd be really fun to do, and but the travel right now is cost prohibitive for me.
oh,
So
for sure.
it's one of those things that I wish I could do right now, but can't quite justify. Which, the dream would be for Amtgard to explode and then have 100,000 Amtgarders all across the nation, and then all of them subscribe to my YouTube channel and buy merch, and then that suddenly makes it so I can afford to go to all of their events, and then I'm flying around the country going to Amtgard events, and it's a business expense, and everyone thinks it's great. That's the insane dream. But right now we don't have the population to support a influencer, and I don't know if it would necessarily even be good for us if we had one. But
Yeah,
that's I,
definitely.
it's certainly
Yeah.
fun to think about and to dream about going to Texas and showing up at all of their events.
Yeah. I do agree that I'm not really sure if Amtgard does need an influencer, but that's definitely a dream to have though if you have one, right? Like I would also love to go travel around and visit different areas and whatnot. The Now I'm going to shift just a little bit more to ANS for a sec here. So
Okay.
you mentioned that you were regent for Lockhaven before. Do you
Mhm.
have a favorite ANS tourney style? And how would you like to see ANS competition expanded in the game?
I think, and this might be a controversial take, I think that tournaments are a disservice to our ANS community because they aren't like it's not objective, right? Like if you enter a best of the best tournament and I bring a shield and someone else brings a chain, they did some chain weaving and they made a pretty necklace, and somebody else brings a painting, and then somebody else brings a baked good, right? It's not like the British Bake Off where we can say, all right, we tasted all the banana puddings and this banana pudding sucked because it didn't have enough bananas. This banana pudding was the best because it tastes just like bananas. This one wins, that one loses. You get off my show. You get $10. We move along, right? How do you do that in Amtgard? You walk in, you're like, I tasted this shield. The shield tastes terrible. I tasted this banana bread. The banana bread tasted okay. Banana bread's the winner, you know? It doesn't work that way. And so a tournament,
Hmm.
like, feels bad because if like you participate in these tournaments, you're like, okay, I've submitted this project that took me 100 hours, and all of the judges are garbers. And so the garbers come and they look at my shield and they're like, yeah, all right, uh, 7 out of 10. And then they go over to this garb and there's this person that's trying to get master garber and they're like half an award away from it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, look at the perfect stitching. And then they can see that, oh, they sealed this by hand and they can do all the. So I think having been regent, I haven't 100% nailed this down, and this is something I've just been thinking about a lot lately. Is I almost wish you could apply for your next award, right? Like your early awards, I wouldn't even do this for say less than six, but once you get up to your like sixth something, you show up to application day or whatever, and you present your project and you demonstrate and you say like, hey, here's my last project. It got a fifth whatever, right? It got my fifth owl for this project. I am presenting today for my sixth owl. Here is my new project. Here are the ways that it is better than my old work. Here are the things that I've improved upon. Here's how I'm approaching masterhood. And then you have a panel of, I don't know, serpent knights or whatever that are sitting around going, yes, yes, we are very wise. We are serpent knights, and we're looking and we say, oh, yes, I see that you improved here, and I can see the ways that you've improved from your last time that you made this thing. And because of this improvement, we will approve your application for your sixth owl. Like when in martial arts, you will, on a certain rotation, you will go up for your next belt. And they'll, at least when I was doing martial arts years ago, in the places that I was doing them, you would become eligible for your next belt, and then they would do a review. You would do a fight, you would do a showcase, you do a kata, and then they would kind of review internally and they talk. And you didn't necessarily have to win the fight. You just had to like demonstrate your skills, and then they'd be like, oh, I guess okay, you are going from yellow belt to yellow belt first stripe, and then you'd move up like that. And so you would take the existing masters and you'd set them up and you'd say, okay, this person isn't trying to be the best of the best. They're not trying to win this tournament because we're not doing a tournament. They're comparing their past works and the works that you would consider of masterhood and asking you on a scale of 1 to 10 to measure where you think that item lays. And then they will either approve or deny that based on an anonymous vote. And you could have like 10 judges, and all of them are anonymous, and then you have at least two decoys. And so, you because you're only actually having seven judges vote on any one item. Three of those judges are decoys; their votes don't matter. And then you could make it anonymous or whatever. But then you would get the feedback of each judge would tell you like, hey, um, I think that this is your next award worthy. Like you are ready to go from a 5 to a 6, or here's the things that we would want to see before you went from a 5 to a 6. And it'd be a lot more useful feedback of like, here's the thing that you should focus on improving next, rather than the current system where they just compare everything to masterhood. And so they're like, oh yeah, we see that you sewed this shirt for us, and we see the shirt, and we're like, yeah, the arms aren't the same length, the seam over here sucks. We didn't like the color, and we see that you put a fighting company symbol on there. We don't like that fighting company, so that 3 out of 10. And you're like, okay, well, I don't feel like two of those are fair criticisms because the color of the shirt and fighting company shouldn't matter. It should be based on skill. And then, okay, yeah, the arms are different lengths. How do I fix that? Oh, maybe my seam work. Maybe I need to roll my seams better or whatever. And then you could try to get that better feedback, and so you could take it back and you could say, okay, like, hey, I have, however many owls I have. I submitted this shield. They said that to get my next thing, instead of doing what I did, I need to just make another iteration on that, and I need to make it slightly better. And here are some specific things that I can do to try to be slightly better. I think that would be a less frustrating system for artists, because a lot of times artists also aren't competitive in their art. Like I know
Mhm.
several people that just don't participate in Dragon Masters or Best of the Best because they're like, yeah, I don't want my art getting criticized and measured up against better artists, because there's always better artists, right? Like I
Mhm.
myself am not an artist, so anything that I produce is going to be objectively worse than an actual artist coming out and doing something. And so, like,
So,
I would,
question.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So, you essentially kind of want almost like guilds of different art forms, right?
I don't even necessarily think that guilds would be necessary. Just instead of saying like I want to get an eighth order of the owl, and I to do that I either have to go to Lockhaven or Kingdom. Like right now, I have 7 owls. I would like to get an eighth owl. Right. Right now, I have
Hmm.
to take any shield work that I've done, and I have to submit that into either a Qualls, a Dragon Master, or a Best of the Best tournament. And then I submit those things, and I'm hoping that one of the judges, A, likes my product, B, thinks that it's good enough that they bother to check what award I'm on, and then C, submits an award rec that D, the local monarchy or the kingdom monarchy approves of and then gives out, right? That's a lot of steps for an artist to trying to move up this ladder to get, especially if they're going into a like best of the best at a kingdom level. The kingdom, they're probably only actually going to look at the top 2 or 3 items for an award. Because, yeah, I might only need an eighth, but I'm competing against people that are going for masterhood. And so those masters are looking at them. And so you're like, oh, this wasn't very good. Or maybe it was totally worth an 8, but they just assume because you're in the best of the best that you already have a 9. And so they're not going to put you in for an 8. Right. And so if you present in that format of I am applying for this level award, please evaluate me based off of that instead of comparatively to a masterhood, because that's the default is everything compared to masterhood at those higher levels, right? Because you're approaching masterhood. So if you say instead of comparing this to a master project, compare this to an 8 project, I feel like you'll have less artists getting frustrated. They'll get better, more reliable feedback that will help them get to masterhood quicker and probably easier, and there'd be more transparency in how it would all be running. So yeah, that's my hot take on symposiums or art shows versus competitions.
Yeah, definitely. Considering ANS tournaments, by the way, I don't think it's as hot of a take as you think. Just because most of the people I've talked to have pretty much said that they either want categories or they want ANS essentially overhauled. So,
Maybe I'm not so I don't really talk to other artists all that often about art because I'm usually busy battle gaming at events, and so people don't think of me as an ANS participant all that much. And I'm not really necessarily upset about that. I am a battle game first player, so I'm not deeply ingrained in those communities the way that someone like yourself might.
oh, okay. Yeah, but it's just really interesting. You had a lot of really interesting ideas. I really enjoyed listening to them. So, I'm actually going to ask you two questions about your you and your character, as well as how you got your Asgard name. And then I'm actually going to jump into some questions regarding your fighting and how it kind of intertwines with your non-combatant side of Amtgard.
Oh,
So,
cool.
is your character more of a pen name for you, or is there a difference between you and your Amtgard character?
Definitely on the pen name side. I don't think I think of myself as Callahan quite regularly. Like there's no functional difference. I do lean into classes a bit. So like if I'm playing wizard, I tend to act a little bit more arrogant than I necessarily would otherwise. And I end up being a little bit more blustery, a little bit more of a know-it-all than I naturally would. But if anything, anytime I'm role playing as Callahan, I'm basically being myself because that, I mean, for me, Amtgard is 70% sport, 30% LARP. And so it's just me with a cooler name, and I'm having fun with it. And I'm just going to be who I am and have my exact same values as I would anywhere else. Alternatively, if I do NPC work for like Night Quest or something, it's really fun to abandon yourself into a character for a day. The most fun I ever had was playing Tom the Bandit Captain. He's a reoccurring character for Serpaco, who does a lot of night quests, and I really added a lot to the character for Serpaco that made Tom a more complicated character for him to deal with, which I think is delightful.
If you're not from Lockhaven, Tom the Bandit appeared at a Lockhaven night quest, and he's been essentially terrorizing them on and off ever since. It's really funny. If you get the chance to come to a Lockhaven night quest and Callahan is being Tom the Bandit, you should totally check it out. It's great.
I would love to revisit the character. I gave him a really tragic backstory. Tom the Bandit was a totally normal, happy-go-lucky dude, and then he lost his job because Paco the Kung Fu Penguin, some of his antics caused the mill to shut down, and so Tom the Bandit lost his job, and then his wife took the kids and went back to her mother's place, and so everything just fell apart for Tom, all because Paco came and wreaked havoc, and so he swore a quest of revenge on Paco, and the banditry is really more of a side gig to just kind of keep his men fed as he tries to figure out how to destroy Paco, the Kung Fu Penguin.
So, in addition to this, kind of stepping away more back to Callahan a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
gosh, maybe I should just have a whole side mini interview of Tom the Bandit. That'd be kind of fun.
I would do that in character for you.
Oh my gosh, Callahan. You know what's going to happen now. So how did you come up with Kalahan Ridgeborn's name?
I don't think I've ever told anyone this story. So I'm a huge nerd, right? Like we're all nerds here. We're playing Amtgard, but I'm like a ginormous nerd. Um, my favorite book series of all time is called The Dresden Files. The Dresden Files is a urban fantasy series set in Chicago, wherein the titular wizard Harry Dresden, he is a private detective, and like the pitch for the story for anyone who doesn't know is there are seven laws of magic. Well, the first law is thou shalt not kill, so you can't kill anyone with magic. So that's why Harry carries a big old revolver with him, and so I just love that. Like, oh yeah, magic's this awesome tool. You're not allowed to kill anybody with it. So I've got my gun. And a number of years ago, the Dresden Files role playing game came out. And me and a group of friends were playing the Dresden Files role playing game. And I was playing as a gangster. I played Patrick Callahan. And Patrick Callahan was this mobster. He had all these connections. He always knew a guy and he was just really fun. And I played him, and around the time, this was right around when I was getting into Amtgard, and so I liked the name Callahan. as a last name, and that actually came from the movie How You Were Sleeping, or How You Were Sleeping While You Were Sleeping, which is a movie in which Sandra Bullock is a train station operator, and then a guy falls onto the train tracks and he's knocked unconscious because people try to mug him. She jumps down on the tracks, she pulls him up off the tracks, they go to the hospital, she's in the hospital. Now, what you don't know is that Sandra Bullock's character, Lucy, has been standing around bored out of her mind at this job forever. And so she's like imagined this whole life for herself where she marries this dude and then he falls in the train tracks and she pulls him off and they go to the hospital. And in the hospital, they won't let her see him, even though she rescued him. And she says under her breath, "Man, I was going to marry that guy." And then one of the nurses hears him. She's like, "That's the fiance. We can't block the fiance." So she brings him in, tells the doctor that she's the fiance. And then, right as Lucy's about to be like, "I'm not actually the fiance. I don't know what you're talking about," the family rolls up. And then the family's like, "Hey, who are you?" And she's like, and the nurse is like, "That's his fiance." And then they're like, "That's the fiance. We haven't talked to him in a year." And then they have this big thing. And anyway, so he's in this coma. And while he's in the coma, Lucy starts falling for his brother. And the brother and her have this like, will they, won't they thing going on this whole time because he thinks that Lucy's engaged to his brother. The brother's in a coma. The brother wakes up and he obviously has no idea who Lucy is. He's like, "I have no idea who this chick is." And and then the like Godfather comes in and he's like, "Son, listen, I know one thing in this world. If you got a girl like this and everybody else loves her, you should probably just marry her just in case, and you'll figure it out on the back end." And he's like, "You know what? That's great advice. I will marry her." And then Lucy's like, "Oh my gosh, how do I how do I get out of this terrible situation? I'm in love with his brother." And so she actually gets to the wedding in the church. And spoiler alert for a movie that came out like that. Yeah, this came out in 1995, so I don't feel bad about spoiling a 30-year-old movie. It's delightful. But at the wedding, she's at the wedding in the hospital, and she's standing there and she's about to marry the one brother, and the priest like opens up his book and she says, "I object." He says, "What do you mean you object?" She's like, and she turns to the family. She's like, "I'm terribly in love with your son." I'm like, "What do you mean? Yeah, you're marrying him right now." She's like, "No, not that one, that one," and points to the brother. And they're all like, "What did you do? Why did you do this terrible thing?" And anyway, and then the blonde lady that was actually engaged to the sleeping guy. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Callahan was their last name, and I thought it was great. But they spelled it with a C, and so I stole it and I made it with a K. And Patrick Callahan was the gangster in the Dresden Files RPG. And then I showed up to Amtgard, and they're like, "What's your name gonna be?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, that's a great question." And they're like, "Just pick something. You can change it later." And I was like, "I don't know. I'll be Callahan." And they're like, "Do you have a last name?" And then I was like, "Yeah, Ridgeborn." And the reason for Ridgeborn is another tangent. Do you want the Ridgeborn tangent?
Well, yeah, of course. We can't have half of the name and not the other half.
All right. So the Ridgeborn tangent. So my wife, she and I met when I was like 8 years old, and when we were kids, we hated each other. We were enemies. We are true enemies to lovers story, but high school sweethearts, the whole nine yards. But when I was in middle school and high school, I actually worked for her dad. So her dad has an autoimmune disease. He has MS, which I don't understand all the medical mumbo jumbo. Basically, he needed a work buddy, and he had two daughters and no sons. So he needed somebody to help out on their tree farm. And so I would go all summer and help him cut firewood for the winter because they use wood heat in Washington State. Wood heat's pretty common. So I would spend all summer cutting wood with him, and he is possibly the weirdest dude ever. And that's coming from a weird dude, right? My father-in-law is delightful in many, many ways. But when I say he's a wackadoodle, I mean he's a wackadoodle. I'll give you two examples. So first, for like 6 years, his best friend was a duck named Beaumont. And he would come out and he would lay in the grass and he'd call Beaumont, and Beaumont would come and sit, and then he would talk to the duck for like an hour. And Beaumont the duck is he has since passed, but I loved Beaumont the duck,
Oh,
and he loved Beaumont the duck. Beaumont, precious to all of our hearts. He also is a like mathematical genius, but not in a useful way. And that sounds kind of mean, but I mean like he has been working on a book for the last like as long as I've known him. Okay. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this book. So his book is one third prayer journal. Like he's talking to Jesus, he's talking to God, he's writing down his prayers. One third philosophy, one third math. and it's titled something. I can't remember the actual title, but it's titled
Huh.
something like "Growing Closer to God by Climbing the Mountain of Mathematics." And he writes the book. I kid you not, he writes it in HTML.
Oh my gosh, why?
He keeps track of how many minutes he's worked on it in the HTML. And he calls you over and he'll say, "Hey, look at this math." And you'll look at it and you'll be like, "Yeah, that's definitely math." And he'll say something crazy like, "There are only 6 people in the entire world who have ever done this kind of math before." And you're like, "Oh, wow, that must mean it's valuable." And he'll be like, "No, no one cares about this math. It's completely worthless. But I did it." And then he's just proud of himself. I'm like, "Yeah, no." So anyway, Don is fantastic. But we have this weird quirk where he called all of his animals ridges. He had like tons of cats, dogs, all kinds of animals. But he'd call anything that had a spine was a ridge. And so he had like his own naming system. And so he'd have like they had ridges. I can't remember what he'd call them, but like he had like subspecies, but it was basically his way of saying vertebrates. He's not dead or anything, and he probably still does it. I just haven't talked to him in a little bit or been out to the farm. So I like thought that was fun. And if you're working out in the woods and one guy's running a chainsaw and you have nothing better to do, you're going to just sit there and let your mind wander. And so letting your mind wander, you start making up stories. And I made up stories about how in my brain I'm like writing these novels that never will be read or anything. And one of the things was like, oh yeah, um, there's the clan that raises Highland cows in Scotland, and they're the Ridgeborns. And so I just took that name out of the dregs of my memory and I popped it in there. And that's been my surname ever since. So that's actually my like quote unquote character backstory for Callahan is um, he comes from the Ridgeborn clan, and the Ridgeborn clan has a big cattle ranch where we raise Highland cows in now
That
it's going to be
explains
Fay
the
Lake.
shield. That explains the shield. I always thought it was so random that you had a Highland cow on it.
Nope, nope. We raise Highland cows. We think my wife and I both think Highland cows are super cute. We wish we had enough land to have Highland cows because they're beautiful, wonderful, magical creatures. They're basically triceratopses, but they're cows.
Yes. And honestly, if you had enough land to have Highland cows and you had cows, I'd probably be over a lot more because I too think that they are adorable.
Right? And they're supposed to be really friendly. So yeah, so that's where Kalahan Ridgeborn came from. On the one side, from a weird half-baked story that I made up about, a random clan of Highlanders, and half from a movie that turned into an RPG that turned into me.
That's really interesting, and I really like how you included so many different things into your character name. I think that's really cool. Especially like given what your father-in-law calls vertebrates like ridges and stuff, I would have never guessed that in a million years. Also, rest in peace, Beaumont.
I actually have an entire lore built out for Beaumont
Is
that
that going to be the Duck Church?
no, it is unrelated.
No.
I at one point wrote a book, a children's book called Beaumont the Duck. Um,
Aww.
Beau- Beaumont the Duck is a cursed paladin. He was a righteous warrior that went throughout the land, and then he was cursed by a wicked fae to become a duck. And so he maintains his intelligence and some of his paladin powers, but he's now a duck. And so he's Lord Beaumont, the uncorruptible paladin of all things right and good, and he will waddle his way to rescue you eventually. And he's Beaumont the Duck. What are you going to do?
I think that's really cute, and I would actually love to see that be published one day. I think that's lovely. I'm a big fan of like fantasy style like children's books for kids. I think it's the extra whimsy. So I'm going to actually ask you two different questions about fighting and non-combat because I'm
Okay.
trying to respect your time. I see it as like, it's getting there. So how do you view the relationship between fighting skills and other skills, such as skills with leadership or service within the community, if any?
It's a discipline thing. I mean, becoming a good fighter is an investment of time and effort, right? You're not going to wake up one day and be a good battle game. That's not how it works, right? If you want to be a good wizard, you have to spend time being a good wizard. This means that you're going to walk around your house casting spells, right? When my son told me he wanted to be a wizard, I said, okay, then we're going to make you a good one. I'm not going to let you be a terrible wizard. He's 8 and he's amazing. He knows all of the wizard spells and not just the good ones. And so, like, yeah, why do we practice pyrotechnics and heat weapon and shatter weapon and destroy armor and finger of death and suppress all of them at the same frequency? Because it's important that you actually be good at all of them, right? If you want to be a paragon wizard, you can't only know the meta and get by. Like, that's not true. You're not being true to yourself. You're not doing yourself proper service at that point, right? If you're going to become a really good battle gamer, you need to be dedicated to that. You need to spend time and effort to make sure that you're doing it. You need to know your charge and can't, right? Like, you cannot convince me that anyone who is a knight of battle doesn't know the charge and can't really well. And if you find me a knight of battle that doesn't know the charge and can't, I'm calling for their belt. Because how did you possibly get that without knowing the charge and can't? That cannot be right. You can't cheat your way into being good. And so the relationship between good leaders and good battle gamers is that good battle gamers have that discipline, they have that experience, they know that they have to practice, they have to put in the time, the reps to actually be getting to that skill level. And that is a transferable skill, right? If you're good at one thing that you've spent a lot of time practicing for, you'll be more successful. Why do parents try to make their children play instruments? Not because I want to hear terrible piano music all day long, but because it will help them teach discipline and perseverance and the life skills that are surrounding having accomplished something difficult, right? And so if you're used to doing difficult things, that will make you a better leader for your park. If you're going to be the park monarch, you can't be tired and not show up, right? The most important thing that you do in your local monarchy is show up every week, even when it sucks, even when your back hurts, even when you're feeling depressed, even when there's snow on the ground. Like, if there's park, you have to be there because if you're not there, you're the leader. People will follow you, right? There's this idea out there that the sins of the parent are multiplied in the child. The idea is that the things that the parents do that are permissible, if you have a parent that is drinking occasionally and maybe they get a little drunk, the the sins of the father are the excesses of the son. So your child is more likely to have problems with alcohol if you do a lot of drinking, right? Maybe you don't have a problem at all, but your child is more likely to have that potential problem. If you're in a leadership position at your park and you skip park on a regular basis because you were up too late at the Magic tournament the night before and you just couldn't get out of bed, well, that becomes the acceptable normal behavior. Whereas if you're always there on time, ready to go, and you say, hey, battle game start at 1:30, you best have a battle game ready to go. You can't be showing up at 1:35 putting up cones. You need to be ready for the battle game to start at 1:30 so that people know, oh, hey, we're serious about this. This is actually a priority. We are making this matter. And so those those soft skills transfer between fighting and non-com. Building shields isn't all fun and games. Like, sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it's cold and you're lonely and you don't really want to do it. And you got to do it because you're on a schedule. And who made that schedule? Well, it was that Kalahan jerk. He made the schedule, and I have to fill this stupid schedule. And I don't want to do that today. I just want to go inside and play Magic the Gathering Arena. But no, I have to actually do the thing that I said I was going to do. And so having the discipline to go all the way through with a project is something that is very valuable. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. That's definitely discipline's very important. And have you found that fighters and non-combat or service-oriented players understand each other well? And how do you bridge that gap?
I don't think so. I think that fighters and non-coms are in a weird place right now, and an almost aggressive place. Like, it's really easy to get stuck in a mindset, right? Like, it'd be really easy for me as a battle gamer to say, like, oh, the non-coms, the girlfriend club, right? Like, oh, who wants to go and deal with that nonsense? And that's not a good attitude because Amtgard requires non-coms and battle gamers, right? The core of Amtgard is battle gaming. That is what the rule set is built around. But the club cannot function without non-com activities, right? Even if every single person at your park is a fighter, you still need a monarch. You still need a champion and a regent and a PM. You need someone
Hmm.
that does the paperwork, right? And so I think part of the problem is battle gamers identify themselves as battle gamers, right? And that's who they are. And I think part of the problem is, and this might be very controversial for real, that non-com has focused too much on separating themselves. Like at events, we now have Warcrat and non-comcrat. Like those are two separate things. Like the idea is you're either a battle gamer or a non-com. It's creating an us and them problem, right? Like I go to events to be in battle games. So I don't like that large portions of the budget are going to this non-com thing over here. Why should my battle gaming subsidize your learning how to do leather crafts? And that creates easy resentment because they're now being othered. It's us and them. We are separate. And I think part of that problem is that we're running Amtgard events and there's this like idea that you can do everything and you really can't, right? Like and ever since I adopted the convention mindset of going to these events, I've been much happier. The mindset is there's a lot of cool things going on. I have to pick my priority and be at that thing. And so whatever item that is, I can look at every hour of an event on the schedule, pick the thing I care about the most, and I go to that. And, that means that I'm not getting involved in these non-com groups. And so there's a growing feeling that, I can't like grab the feeling and stop it, but there's this like idea of non-com versus combat and that they're exclusive from each other and that they can't get along and that like the non-coms doing well isn't hurting battle gamers and battle gamers doing well isn't hurting the non-coms, but there's this like competition that's brewing. And I think it's not helped by non-coms trying to participate in battle games. Like that's a complicated idea. Like how are you participating in a battle game but being a non-combatant? Like this is a no whack person, right? And that can have so much variety inside of it because if you've got everything from if you get within 10 feet of me, I'm calling dead to if you touch me, I will die, like levels of non-com. And understanding like there's not an easy solution for those people being involved in battle gaming. Do they even want to be involved in battle gaming? And there's a definite vocal group of non-com people that want to be involved in battle gaming, but I don't think they know what they want to be doing. And until they figure out what they want to be doing, there's this awkwardness where they're demanding inclusion, and we're the battle gamers. We're like, okay, but what do you want? You know, like it's not like they don't get voting rights, right? It would almost be easier if they were this persecuted minority class because then we could fix it, right? If we were like, oh yeah, only fighters are allowed to vote in elections, we could very quickly be like, okay, hey, that's not okay. We need to fix that, right? That's a very easy thing to point to and say, this is the problem. This is the solution. Right now, we have this nebulous problem of non-com wants to be more involved in battle gaming, but they're non-combatants, but they want to be involved in battle gaming, but they can't get hit, and we can't let them get hit because if they get hit, it might be dangerous, but they want to be involved. How do they want to be involved? They don't know how they want to be involved. And so it's this circle of frustration where both parties are feeling it and I don't think that there's a simple or clean answer to this because the level of non-com has so much range to it, and the level of involvement has so much potential range to it that it creates. I've talked to people on my podcast who play battle games on crutches. Like that's a level of non-com. If you're playing Candy Druid on crutches, that's a different experience than somebody with a wheelchair might participate. So it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've talked about the different levels of, how a non-combatant might be on the field. So it's interesting to see how your opinion has kind of evolved with that. Yeah. I do agree that it's a very difficult scenario, and there's not really an easy answer, but there are some ideas that are currently being brewed for Lockhaven's CTFI event, so I'm pretty excited, and I'm really hoping that we can kind of close some of those gaps with that.
That'll be awesome. Yeah, this is something that I'm still thinking about a lot, and I have an evolving opinion on. This is something that I will probably change my opinion two or three more times on before I mean, hopefully we find a solution. But there's, I mean, I definitely feel it from the fighter side and not the non-com side. And so my opinion is going to be colored that way.
I wouldn't have added in fighter questions specifically for fighters, if I didn't want their opinions. It's important to have all different kinds of opinions because, I mean, the thing is this game relies heavily on fighters, Like, Amtgard is a LARP, it is a foam combat sport. It is also a cool thing where people get to craft and talk with each other and RP. And, I mean, all these different parts are important.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, really just trying to kind of help everyone understand one another is my main goal here. So now that those are done, I'm going to do some closing questions here. Some of them don't apply to you as you're not specifically a non-combatant.
Okay.
What, yeah. So what's one lesson you've learned from Amtgard that you carry with you?
That's a really tough question. I think the most important thing that I've learned from Amtgard is to not judge a book by its cover. There have been a number of times where I have made presumptions that have turned out to be incorrect. I think it's made me a better person because of that. Like, not taking everything at face value and digging a little deeper.
Yeah, definitely. What do you hope your legacy in Amtgard will be, besides being the coolest Paragon wizard and Battlemaster ever?
Well, I'm not a battle master yet. I'm
Well,
hopeful.
I'm banking on the fact that you probably will be at some point, so.
I I'm I feel like that's an eventually thing for me. Becoming a battle master and then eventually a knight of battle is sort of the penultimate goal for me for Amtgard. And I like becoming a knight would be such a huge thing. Like that's a an achievement. And I carry a lot of my own baggage into knighthood. Like the idea of knights and like I've always been a huge Arthurian legend guy. I love of the stories, the wacky powers, the hijinks, the adventures, and knights were and are something like the concept of a knight as we imagine it, not real history, but they have a place in the mind of culture of respect and glory and responsibility that is something I wish to take upon myself. That's a burden I want to hold. And I love battle gaming. I love talking about battle gaming. And I think that's become fairly obvious since I have almost 100 hours of me talking about battle gaming as a podcast. But like becoming a knight of battle doesn't change anything about who I am. It's more of an acknowledgement of what I've been doing. And I don't fundamentally see things changing. The biggest thing for me is if I become a knight of battle, my mentor mentee relationships can become formal and I can give people the recognition they deserve. And I can say, this is my squire. right? Like right now, I can take on men at arms. I have a man. I've offered three other people men at arms belts. They're already in belt lines, which is fine. I'm not offended by this, but I still have mentor mentee relationships with those people. And being a knight gives you like it's an acknowledgement of your skill one, but I mean you're also acknowledging the teaching element, and I feel like I am involved in that. And so that's my long-term goal is to be a knight and then continue doing what I'm doing and just being like the examples that I've had before me and really helping the new fighters to get there. Knighthood is a pyramid scheme. You know, the goal of every knight is to get all their underbelts knighted, and then they get more underbelts, and then they get those underbelts knighted. And, you know, having a knight, I think, is a huge retention part of the game as well. So that's the long term goal for me is to become a knight and then continue to do what I've been doing. Um, but I don't think that was the question you asked. What was my legacy? My
Hmm.
legacy at that point, it's an interesting thing. Like I already have left a legacy. My YouTube channel will be there forever, right? Until Google dies or the Earth meets the heat death of the universe, that content is there. So there will always be an opportunity. If I die tomorrow, people can still learn from Paragon Wizard Callahan and talk, see all of that. That'll be there forever. The legacy that I would be leaving is the best legacy is knowledge. Knowledge is one of those things where the more you give it away, the more you get. By doing the Paragon interviews, doing the Battle Knight chats, I've learned more about the game, and that really is the legacy I want to leave. I mean, in one of my favorite card games, it's called Shards of Infinity. There's this card called Omnis, the Knower of All, and I feel like that's such a like cool title, you know, like Kalahan Ridgeborn, the Knower of All. Like, ooh, that's neat. Like, I can't realistically know everything, but I'd like to certainly try. So the legacy is knowledge, and knowledge is given. You can charge for knowledge, but it's best given away because knowledge hoarded is knowledge lost. So
Hmm.
that's what I want my legacy to be: is the knowledge that I have accumulated and spread.
Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight for this interview, Callahan. It was lovely talking to you and getting to learn more about your podcast, your shield making, and a lot of other really interesting things. So I really appreciate your time out tonight, and thank you very much for allowing me to interview you.
Thank you for bringing me on the show. It's been a delight, and I'm really excited to see where you go with the rest of the series.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to hear more about non combat participants in Amtgard, consider clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. This lets me know you like my content and would like to listen to more in the future. If you would like someone specific to be interviewed, or you'd like to have me interview you, please reach out to my Discord server at Mellafalaman or message me on Facebook using my real name, Megan McLean. Thank you!